Hey guys, so I wanted to quickly react to a reaction. So the reaction is to a video I released recently on the second subtype of INFJ that I proposed to list in my recent videos. The first one was the adaptive submissive INFJ. The second one is the solipsist or the solipsistic INFJ. This comes from the terminology of this book, The Infinite Soul, which is my latest book on the INFJ. This is about INFJs in the outer world. INFJs in the modern world, how to live an INFJ, what are our options to reach a life of happiness, fulfillment, and meaning, right? This is the sequel to this book, which is more about the inner psychology. This is more about, okay, like our stack is NIFETISE. What does it involve in terms of our existential traits? So these are two different books, and the terminology of this book, the adaptive submissive INFJ, I made a video on that, and everyone agrees, the get along with everybody type of INFJ. We've all been there. In a sense, most INFJs start there. They repress their inmost qualities, which emerge, as it were, principally from introverted intuition and the combination of NI and FE. They repress those in order to be malleable and flexible enough to get along with everyone at some level of superficiality. They just don't want conflict. And then they reserve maybe their true self for a very select number of people, but a lot of the time, they are kind of submitting. They're submissive to a reality that they find to be too hostile to be able to cope with. Hence, they choose the adaptive approach. Not a lot of debate about that. Most people agree that that was something we went through. Now, what's important to realize is that some people just stay there. Some INFJs just stay there their whole lives. In order to evolve toward what I call the liberated INFJ, which is the latest stage I haven't discussed yet in the video, often we go through what I refer to as the solipsistic stage. That's the video that elicited some interesting reactions, because as you know, I always read the comments, and the reactions were something like, okay, so the solipsistic INFJ, as the name suggests, solipsism, for short means you're wrapped up in your own world. So you're completely fascinated by the vision of inner archetypes that NI tends to come with. You're not necessarily consciously aware that you're looking at archetypes, but you tend to live in a world of your own making. Your worldview is all that matters, and you tend to distrust anything that does not belong to it and to reject it or to politely leave it aside, often to not get involved with the external world. The external world, the world of reality, of everyday events, being something that you feel is threatening or that you feel is not relevant to your core vision, and it's often perceived as something that does not really help you cope with reality. Reality is too much, reality is too hard, and so we become wrapped up. So in a sense, the solipsist is more authentic than the adaptive INFJ, because at least they follow something that comes from their NI or worldview. But in another sense, that worldview is still informed by an opposition to the external world. And by external world, I mean the physical world and the social world, the world of other people. So there is a dependence for a lot of solipsistic INFJs on the external world by implication, as something that has to be rejected in order for their NI worldview to be asserted. And some people in that, in reaction to that video, seem to be saying, wow, you're basically saying that we should trust the external world, that the solipsist is not the last stage, that there should be a stage of liberation. Again, I'll discuss it in a future video, where the INFJ ends up trusting the external world, opening their arms to the external world. And that seemed kind of concerning, scary, and maybe crazy an idea to some INFJs. She said, how can you be an INFJ and trust external reality, right? And that's a very interesting question. So the easy response for me would have been to say to these users, well, that's the typical reaction of a solipsist. Of course, because a solipsist has an NI worldview which is entirely predicated on remaining self-subsistence, being kind of wrapped up on itself, right? Doesn't depend on the external world. So it has to reject the external world. So in some sense, it's aligned with existential alienation, which I discuss in the Ecstatic Soul. But in some sense, there's a self-fulfilling prophecy in the solipsist. They are wrapped up in their NI worldview, and anything that tries to break it is rejected as irrelevant or dangerous or not likely to promote their well-being. And what I'm saying is, this particular mode of existence, because it's a choice, let's remember, this is about real life. It's not just about what your hardware is like. This is more about what the ecstatic soul is about. We're talking about the choices that you make with the kind of hardware that you have. And the decisions that you make is about, okay, am I going to remain in this level of distrust of external reality where you're wrapped up in your own world? Well, you might think this is very safe, but it's also limiting. It's also atrophying your possibilities because you're not really engaging with external reality and you're defined by fear of external reality. So in a sense, you lead an existence that you think is comfortable as a solipsist, but at the same time, it's overarching in theme, I'm sorry to say. There is a germ of authenticity there because you're trying to be faithful to your NI, but you're still overarchingly defined by fear of the external world. And what I'm saying is, ultimately, this fear for full well-being, for a completely purposeful and meaningful existence that is blooming as an INFJ, you need to kind of surmount that fear. You need to, and the only way to surmount that fear is to be indeed open to embracing external reality. But the liberated INFJ, the INFJ that I list as my third type in this book, which I haven't discussed yet, just wait a moment before you draw too hasty conclusions, because it's not like they're not an INFJ that's just like having great fun like an ENFP or whatever, you know, in external reality and acting as if they're not an INFJ. Of course, this person is still going to be an INFJ. What I'm saying is that they're going to be a particular kind of INFJ, right, that has gone through the phases of so alienation, of course, CF the ecstatic soul, adaptive submissiveness, first mode of existence available to us, and usually solipsism. This is literally a quote from this book, a solipsist with their arms wide open. So the idea is that if the liberated INFJ that we'll discuss in the video very soon is still an INFJ that has to take care of their NI worldview and not allow it to dissolve in external reality. There is still that tense relationship. But we're going to try to look at how we can reconcile what's good in solipsism and what's good in the embrace of external reality, because there's something good about that. If you want to be a full human being, you need to acknowledge the existence and importance of external reality. Okay, so that's what we're going to be looking at. In the sense, it's a very Hegelian scheme. It's only something that I've realized recently. It's like, you know, in Hegel, you always have like the thesis, the antithesis, and the synthesis. The thesis is adaptiveness, the antithesis is solipsism, and the synthesis, hopefully we'll arrive at it, is liberation. Okay, so stay tuned for that video because you might just be surprised. So keep in mind that you can still get those two books. All the links are below. Less than 10 euros, guys. And God, thank you so much to those who have been supporting me on Patreon. Anywhere from 3 euros a month. It really helped me keep the channel going in these difficult economic times. It's mostly to support my work, but I appreciate it so deeply because it allows me to continue producing videos. So please consider supporting me. The link is below on Patreon. Okay, see you guys. Bye-bye.